Some federal judges across the country are getting increasingly upset with the Trump administration for not complying with their orders in cases involving immigrants. The New York Times reports, quote, at least 35 times since August, federal judges have ordered the administration to explain why it should not be punished for violating their orders in immigration cases. For instance, one judge ordered an immigrant be released from custody in Minnesota, but instead the man was let go in El Paso. The Times says this has come up multiple times in California, Texas, Florida, Massachusetts, Michigan, New York, West Virginia, and Puerto Rico. Former federal judge Jeremy Fogel joins us now. He is currently the executive director of the Berkeley Judicial Institute at Cal Berkeley's Law School. Judge, thank you so much for being here. What recourse, if any, do judges have? Does holding someone in contempt really have teeth?
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to be with you. The contempt power is a very rarely exercised power. You know, the public sometimes thinks contempt is something judges do all the time, and they pound their gavel and they throw people in jail. But actually, it's a very limited power. It's used very sparingly. And for a judge to get to the point where they think about doing it, they have to be pushed pretty far. Two of the recent orders that have been made, and you mentioned that in your opening, in Minnesota, Judge Schultz, who, by the way, is a very conservative judge, known as such. This is a bipartisan issue, and he was the one who ordered somebody released, and it turned out the person wasn't there. Judge Stearns in Massachusetts, who's on the other side of the aisle, had a similar.
So there's this growing frustration among federal judges all over the country with the Trump administration when it comes to following their orders, especially in immigration cases. The New York Times reported that since August, judges have had to ask the administration for explanations on at least 35 occasions for ignoring their orders. One example that really stands out is when a judge in Minnesota ordered the release of an immigrant, but instead, that person ended up being released in El Paso, definitely not what was intended. This kind of situation has popped up in various states like Texas, California, Florida, Massachusetts, Michigan, New York, West Virginia, and even Puerto Rico. To dig deeper into this, a former federal judge who now heads the Berkeley Judicial Institute at the University of California, Berkeley Law School, shared some insights. He pointed out that the power judges have to hold someone in contempt is pretty rare. People often think judges throw around contempt charges all the time, but in reality, it's something they use very cautiously. For a judge to even consider that route, they usually need to feel seriously pushed to the edge. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. This isn't just a rumor or gossip. A sitting judge in New York has looked over Donald Trump's sworn testimony and has officially stated that his words were hollow and untrue. That's not just ambiguous phrasing, it's a firm message that calls out the president for lying under oath. And believe me, it doesn't stop there. Oh, and let's be real for a moment. You can't always trust headlines these days. That's why we've created Pump Politics, so you can get the actual stories with real context and no corporate nonsense. If you want to keep up with everything without the fluff, sign up for our free newsletter to have the news delivered straight to your inbox every single day. Just click the link in the description to join us. Let's dive into some recent developments that are definitely raising eyebrows. In Minnesota, there's this judge named Schultz, and he's known to be pretty conservative. Interestingly enough, he made a ruling that involved releasing someone, but when it came down to it, that person was actually not there. It's amusing how these situations sometimes unfold. Then we have Judge Stearns over in Massachusetts, who's on the opposite side of the political spectrum, encountering a similar scenario. Now, this isn't just a random mishap. What's really going on here is a troubling trend that's been documented by courts, fact-checkers, and legal filings. It looks like Donald Trump has a pattern of saying one thing under oath in one situation and then doing a complete 180 under oath in another. We're talking about sworn affidavits that clash with sworn depositions. One judge even remarked in his ruling that Trump's credibility has taken a severe hit, calling his fraudulent claims shocking and saying that his lack of remorse feels almost pathological. These aren't just opinions from political rivals. These are serious statements from a judge who's witnessed extensive testimony and evidence. So, why should we care about this? Well, when a judge puts it in writing that your testimony is dubious and your sworn statements come off as empty and insincere, it really shakes things up. It affects how other courts see you, how prosecutors engage with you, and how juries assess your credibility against documents and witnesses. Plus, it creates this legal paper trail that follows you forever into every future case or hearing where your trustworthiness is under scrutiny. Now, here's the kicker. Trump is the sitting president of the United States, and multiple judges have publicly stated they don't believe him when he swears to tell the truth. That's quite remarkable and definitely unusual. Today, I'm going to break down all this evidence for you piece by piece, and trust me, once you see it all lined up, it creates a pretty bleak picture. We've got the judge's own words from the civil fraud trial, along with those contradicting sworn statements. Let's dive into what's been happening with Trump and his company. There's been some pretty big developments lately, especially from the New York civil fraud trial, which has really brought his honesty into question. In 2023, New York Attorney General Letitia James launched a serious civil fraud lawsuit against Trump, his sons Donald Jr. and Eric, the Trump Organization, and a few other executives. The main accusation? For over 10 years, they were alleged to have inflated property values by hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars to make things look good for banks and insurance companies. They were accused of dressing up their financial statements to secure better deals and lower premiums, which sounds like a huge deal when you think about it. Then the trial kicked off in October 2023, and it went on for months, with Trump actually testifying. But instead of playing the part of a straightforward witness, he went in a completely different direction. Reports from those in the courtroom described him as combative and evasive, rambling on in ways that didn't really connect to the questions asked. He took shots at the Attorney General, calling her a hack, and even went after the judge in the entire process. When it came time to address details about the financial statements and property valuations, he sidestepped the issues entirely, laying blame on his employees and accountants. He insisted that the numbers were conservative and that his properties were actually worth much more than what was stated. Judge Arthur Ingram, who was overseeing the case, certainly didn't seem too impressed by Trump's antics. In fact, he was far from impressed. There was even a moment when Trump made a statement in the hallway outside the courtroom that looked like it broke a limited gag order. It's all part of a broader picture that legal experts are saying makes Trump's testimony something judges might not trust moving forward. This is one of those moments that will be documented and will surely follow him into every legal challenge he faces during and after his presidency. It's a pretty significant situation unfolding here. So here's the deal. Trump ended up being called to the stand by the judge, and when he testified, he insisted he was talking about Michael Cohen, the key witness for the prosecution. But the judge didn't buy it. After hearing Trump's take on things, he penned a formal court order stating that he found Trump's explanation to be hollow and untrue. That's pretty striking, right? A judge said in writing that the former president's sworn testimony just doesn't hold water. The judge pointed out that Trump lacked credibility, and this wasn't just a little procedural hiccup. We're talking about Trump under oath trying to clarify his own words, and the judge concluded he was lying. Now, Trump was fined $10,000 for breaking a gag order, and this judgment about his credibility was added to the case's permanent record. Then in February 2024, when Judge Ingram wrapped things up, he went even further. He stated that Trump's overall testimony throughout the trial was not credible at all. He pointed out that Trump often dodged the actual questions and went off on long tangents that had nothing to do with the trial itself. The judge noted that this refusal to give direct answers significantly hurt Trump's credibility. When it came to describing the fraud, the language the judge used was pretty shocking for a civil case. He said the fraud shocked the conscience and described Trump and his co-defendants as showing a total lack of remorse that nearly borders on pathological. Those words came straight from the judge. As a result, Trump faced a massive penalty of $354 million, plus about $100 million in interest, which totals over $450 million. On top of that, he was banned from running any businesses in New York for 3 years, while his sons got a 2-year ban as well. The Trump Organization had to bring in an independent compliance monitor. Fast forward to August 2025, and an appeals court did reduce that financial penalty by throwing out part of the judgment, but that's just part of the whole saga. So, here's the latest scoop. A panel of judges recently backed up a previous ruling that said Trump's testimony just wasn't credible. This ruling comes from a majority of 5 judges who agreed with Judge Engoron's assessment. They mentioned how Engoron was fair during the trial, allowing both sides to express their arguments. It's not just one judge's opinion anymore. Multiple judges at different levels of the court are on record saying they don't trust Donald Trump to tell the truth under oath. The ban on him running a business in New York is still in effect, locking him out for 3 years. His sons are in a bit of a pickle too, not allowed to manage the company for the next 2 years. Now, with the appeal confirming that his testimony wasn't credible, this finding carries even more weight for any future legal battles. Now let's dive into some contradictions in his sworn statements, which really highlight a pattern here. Back in 2017, when Trump took office, he signed an affidavit claiming he'd resigned from all positions in the Trump Organization. This was supposed to prove he was breaking away from his business while serving as president. It was a formal sworn statement showing he stepped back from the company. Fast forward to 2021, during a different legal matter, Trump was asked if there was ever a time he wasn't president of the Trump Organization. His answer was quite the twist, as it contradicted his earlier affidavit. He claimed he was an inactive president while in the White House, but never actually stopped holding the title. Just think about what that means. One sworn document says he resigned from everything, while another insists he never truly left the role of president of his company. Both of these statements were under oath and carry serious legal implications. They directly contradict each other. The New York Attorney General's office pointed out this contradiction in their court filings, highlighting how Trump's own words presented two completely different narratives depending on which situation he was in. And here's the icing on the cake. When Trump had his deposition with the Attorney General's office in August 2022, he invoked his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination and dodged questions over 400 times. It's honestly hard to believe he said that out loud. It's honestly hard to believe that back in 2016, during his presidential campaign, Trump made a big deal out of the Fifth Amendment. He literally asked at a rally, "If you're innocent, why are you taking the Fifth?" Fast forward to now, and he's doing just that, taking the Fifth himself and refusing to answer any real questions. It's like he's turned the tables on his own arguments. This flip-flopping is a serious issue. When someone constantly changes their story based on what suits them at the moment, judges start to lose faith in their credibility. And that's exactly what has happened in Trump's legal troubles. Experts and fact-checkers have pointed out hundreds of misleading statements made by him, not just on the campaign trail, but also in court. Nowadays, courts are relying more on documents, emails, financial records, and credible witnesses instead of just taking his word for it. Take the case of his former chief financial officer, Alan Weisselberg, for example. Weisselberg ended up lying under oath during a fraud trial and eventually had to negotiate a plea deal related to perjury for that very testimony. He had already admitted guilt in a separate tax fraud case where the Trump Organization itself was hit with 17 felony counts. When it came out that Weisselberg might have lied on the stand, the judge sent a note to both parties asking for advice, hinting that he might find all of Weisselberg's testimony unreliable. This whole scenario really sheds light on the kind of culture that Trump cultivated during his years at the top. You have a chief financial officer who lied in court, and even the judge found Trump to be not credible while he found Cohen, a former lawyer, believable. Cohen described Trump as someone who behaves like a mob boss, hinting at what he wants without saying it outright. This stark contrast between the two tells us a lot about the environment within the Trump Organization, where sworn testimony seemed to be just another way to spin a narrative instead of being a truthful obligation. It's a troubling reflection on how business was conducted in that world. Let's chat about why this whole situation really matters. I get it, court cases can make some people zone out. It's easy to think, oh great, another legal saga, and just move on. But this goes beyond just legal drama. It actually has significant implications for Trump and his legal future, as well as for every American who cares about whether the president can actually be trusted to tell the truth when it's most important. When the leader of the free world has been deemed an unreliable witness under oath by the courts, it shakes things up for everyone. Now let me break down the three key takeaways that really stand out. First up, once a judge lays down a credibility finding that sticks with you in every future case, this is crucial to grasp. When a judge writes in an official ruling that someone's testimony is untrue and hollow, that doesn't just vanish once the case is over. It becomes part of the legal history. Other judges, prosecutors, and opposing lawyers can bring that up in future cases, saying, hey, a court has already said this person can't be trusted when they're under oath. That's pretty damaging for anyone going through legal issues, and Trump is currently dealing with quite a few. From investigations related to Epstein, ongoing financial reviews, possible perjury charges for contradicting his earlier sworn statements, appeals to the fraud case itself, in every one of these scenarios, the other side can now point to a judge's finding that Trump's testimony isn't credible, and this isn't just some single judge's take anymore. The appeals panel that looked at the case agrees with that determination of credibility, meaning this isn't subjective. It's an established judicial finding recognized at multiple levels in the New York court system. For anyone gearing up to build a case against Trump, this is like hitting the jackpot because they don't have to make the case from square one about his unreliability as a witness. The courts have already set that precedent. All they need to do is reference the previous rulings and say, look, this man has been found untrustworthy. So, here's the deal. The judges have found that the claims made under oath just aren't believable. That raises some eyebrows. One important takeaway here is the contradiction in sworn statements, which could really lead to some serious perjury issues. Now, perjury isn't just about saying one thing and then saying another. It's a precise legal term. Prosecutors need to show that someone knowingly made a false statement about something significant. When you look at a sworn affidavit from 2017 stating that he resigned from all positions, and then a sworn deposition from 2021 where he insists he never stopped being president of the company, you've got a real conundrum. One of those claims has to be untrue because they can't both be right. Either he resigned or he didn't. Either he held on to his title or he let it go. This becomes even more alarming when you realize that judges found his trial testimony to be empty and untrue, which really calls his credibility into question. There's a clear pattern here that prosecutors can leverage to build their case. We're not just talking about a perjury case alone, although that's still on the table, but rather a broader narrative of someone who doesn't treat sworn testimony with the seriousness it deserves. It paints a picture of someone who shifts his story to fit the situation instead of sticking to the truth. The judge even referred to Trump's lack of remorse as bordering on pathological. That's a heavy word, indicating that we're not looking at a one-time error here. It suggests a continuous pattern of behavior, a fundamental approach to honesty that the court found very concerning. In any legal situation, whether civil or criminal, this pattern can do major damage since judges and juries will likely prioritize the documents over his words. They'll trust emails more than his explanations, financial records more than his claims, and third-party witnesses over his interpretation of events. This really puts Trump in a tough spot for all his ongoing legal battles. Now, on to the third takeaway. This pattern of behavior is just what his opponents need to craft a narrative about his credibility as we head towards the midterms. Sure, it may seem like all this courtroom drama might not resonate much with voters, and there's some truth to that during average times. But let's be real, these aren't just average times. We're staring down the barrel of the 2026 midterm elections, and it's quite a situation. The president right now is dealing with a serious blow to his credibility, thanks to some hard-hitting words from judges he appointed himself. These judges have put it on the record that his testimony isn't believable. You can bet that Democrats are going to capitalize on this. They'll be using phrases like hollow and untrue and severely compromised credibility in campaign ads, town halls, and debates all around the country. Now here's the kicker for Trump. He can't just brush this off as another political jab. This isn't just talk from a Democratic politician or a liberal commentator. This comes straight from the judicial system. We've got written rulings from judges and confirmations from appeals courts clearly stating that Donald Trump can't be trusted when he's under oath. That's unprecedented. Sure, past presidents have faced accusations of lying or inconsistencies in their statements, but none have ever had judges explicitly declare their sworn testimony untrustworthy in such a structured way. This is a big deal because it carries real consequences: legal, political, and historical. Imagine going into any discussion about whether this president can be believed, with multiple judges saying, in black and white, that his testimony is not credible. For instance, his credibility has been labeled as severely compromised, and his statements in various proceedings have contradicted each other on fundamental points regarding his role in his own company. It's worth noting that his former CFO was found lying on the stand and is facing perjury charges. The judge presiding over all these issues remarked that the level of fraud and lack of regret borders on pathological. And this is all out there in public records, thoroughly documented, which means it will stick with Trump through every legal challenge, political battle, and discussion about his reliability for the rest of his presidency and beyond. So the real issue now isn't whether Trump lied under oath. That question has already been answered by the judges. The pressing question is, what's going to happen next? Will prosecutors take action on those perjury charges due to the conflicting statements? And will other courts point to these credibility findings in future cases? It's definitely an interesting time we're in, especially with the Epstein file investigations potentially leading to new legal proceedings. We're all wondering how Trump's statements will hold up against actual documents and witness testimonies. The big question is whether or not voters will even care about any of this come November. Those are the key points that will shape what happens next. Trump has managed to get through quite a lot in his career, from impeachments to indictments and all kinds of scandals that would have sunk any other politician. But facing a collapse of credibility in a court of law presents a whole different challenge. Sure, he can spin things in the media, go on the attack against his critics, or rally his supporters at events, but the truth is, when it comes to a judge's ruling, there's no way to spin that. You can't just talk your way out of an appellate decision, and you certainly can't gather your base in a courtroom where sworn testimonies clash with solid evidence. What the courts are saying should raise some eyebrows for everyone involved. This is a story that promises to develop further as new cases progress and additional rulings come in. So it's worth keeping up with all of it. If you want to stay updated, definitely subscribe so you won't miss anything. And if you're looking for a no-nonsense, straightforward take on the daily news, the newsletter link is just down below. Join the Pump Politics community and engage in discussions that actually matter. Stay sharp and stay informed. And remember, don't let anyone spin the narrative.